What's wrong with the Phils, man? 4 back of Atlanta with 28 to go. Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. He's got the Phillies mailbag. And by the way, the lineup is out, Frank. So let's hit you with the lineup real fast and get your immediate reaction. It's Santana leading off, Hoskins, Herrera, Ramos, Cabrera, Nick Williams, Cesar Hernandez, Scott Kingery, and Jake Arrieta. So, again, just putting the name in the hat and pulling them out.
Yeah, that's kind of what Gabe Kapler has to do. I mean, what can he do? I mean, he's got the players. They have to perform. I mean, at the end of the day, the players have to perform, and they're not.
Is he giving them the best opportunity to perform, though? Like I heard, we hear Crucky after a game, Batalico after the game, and both of them are kind of suggesting, almost frustrated, in saying, I like to know when I got to the ballpark, I knew I was hitting in the 3-hole every day, and I was off on Saturday. Like Fergosi would tell me, hey, you're going to play 4 games in a row, you're off Saturday. Be prepared.
Yeah, and I did hear those comments. I mean, it's a little bit of a different game, of course, than the days that they played, but yeah, I think people like to get into a routine, and I think that's fair to say of any job, right? You want to sort of get into a routine, but the problem is, like sales, if you're not selling, right, you're not going to have the opportunities, and if you're not hitting, I mean, what can you do? I mean, it's a performance-based job. It's a really tough call to make there.
Do you think, though, that the players feel that, like we just talked about earlier, if they score 1 run on Monday, it's almost like he says, all right, I got to change things up. If they score 1 run again on Tuesday, he's like, all right, I got to change things up. Like he's not allowing them to say, hey, this is where I feel comfortable.
One thing I did notice is that the Chicago Cubs had, if you think the Phillies have had a lot of different lineups, the Chicago Cubs lead baseball, and they had more than 20 different lineups than the Phillies. And where are the Cubs sitting? They're in first place. They look really poised for a playoff push. So I don't think it's necessarily that. I think the way the game has changed, you kind of know what's going on with the matchups. I mean, I think that if you're a player who's educated at this point, you kind of know when your days are going to be off. Like if you're a left-handed hitter and you're going to face the Dodgers and Clayton Kershaw, I think you'll probably have an idea that if you struggle against lefties, you're going to have that day off when Clayton Kershaw pitches. And that's just the way the game goes. So I guess a lot depends on how, and this is something I haven't totally been able to figure out personally, but does Gabe Kapler let the players know when these things are coming up? I know he mentioned the other day, for example, that when he said he looked at the schedule and the day to rest Rhys Hoskins was against Jose Urena. Did he know that ahead of time? Did he walk in and say, oh wow, I'm out of the lineup? I think if he knew, then he might be okay with that. But, it's a game of matchups anymore, and that goes both ways, pitching, batting. And as long as the players have a sense of what's going on, I think they'll be okay. I don't think it's as simple as you show up and that you're in the lineup that day and you look to see where you are. I think those days are kind of over, though.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about, I guess, and Hoskins is another conversation. I talked about this. If he doesn't get 18 homers in his first, 60 games, that's who we really look at this guy as. I think a lot of fans look at him as that guy who got off to a historic start. If he doesn't get off to that start and he just, has a good start, do we look at him the same way as we do now? Because quite frankly, he's been struggling. His numbers aren't great. I mean, he's had a nice year. He's got 27 homers, very good, but he's not on, he's not going to hit 35, 40 homers. He's hitting 250. That's not great. If he doesn't get off to the start that his career got off to, are we viewing Rhys Hoskins the same way we do?
That's a tough question. I think, as we've said in the past, he really needed some time off. We saw when he had that minor injury with his jaw that the rest did him very well, and he came out fierce and kind of doing what he was doing at his best. And I think the problem is with Rhys Hoskins, they're just riding him way hard, and he's really the only offense. I think they're treating him like he's the only solution to the offense right now, and I think that's a lot to ask of somebody with his experience, and I would like to see him get more time. Noticed him the one day, the other day, and everybody's saying, well, why is Hoskins on the bench? You want your best players in there. So it's been a tough balance for somebody, and he's playing a lot. I think it's important to note that he is playing a lot more than he has in any other season at any other time.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to be a little bit drained. So I think it's hard to say what we would think of him without that start last year too. But I think as time goes on and he gets better used to playing this amount of games with this rigor, being in a playoff hunt for the very, very first time, that's an adjustment in itself. We'll see who he is when we see a bigger body of work.
Okay, talk about Frank Klose, 97.3, ESPN.com. Let's get into the listener mailbag questions this week. Robert's got a good one. The Phillies, Al, have 33 players on the roster. Can any combination of them actually help score runs?
Yeah, this is a big question. And I think my best way to answer this was, the guys that should be producing aren't. And it's not just one. Now, Hoskins has struggled to a certain extent, but he's not struggling like Cesar Hernandez, who has completely fallen off the entire planet, it seems, at the moment. Odubel Herrera, same exact problem. If you think about what the Phillies were getting in April, they had Cesar Hernandez leading off with a 400 on-base percentage for the first 2 months. Now he can't seem to get on base, right? Then you look to Herrera, and of course Odubel Herrera. His offensive struggles are very well documented. In fact, I'm really surprised he's batting third, but I guess somebody has to bat third, right? When you look at that, when you look at the lineup up and down, and you have those struggles, you had Maikel Franco, who is kind of carrying the team for a while. He hasn't had a hit in a week. Now that might be because he banged up his wrist a little bit. He said that he banged up his wrist in Toronto, and as a result, he's kind of been struggling the last week or so. So that's three major pieces right there. And again, if you just keep going down the list of all the different players in the lineup, and you add Hoskins to that, you just can't score runs. Now the Phillies are getting tremendous play out of Wilson Ramos. He's batting 400 since he joined the Phillies. Roman Quinn has been tremendous. And Asdrubal Cabrera, he is better than the little rough start he got as a Philly. He has a couple home runs the last few days, which seems like he's getting back on track. But Carlos Santana, 286 since the All-Star break with lots of hard-hit balls and some walks. So what I would just try to do is stack the hot hands. And I would have Roman Quinn in there every day, whether it's right field, center field, left field. I would make sure that the very capable Carlos Santana, who's been playing very, very well the second half of the season, remains getting opportunities to kind of work on those opportunities, at various spots of the lineup, wherever they can put him to kind of stack that talent, I would do. And really, unfortunately, it's kind of come to that where, as we just said, you can't really you either got to mix things up or you worry about it being mixed up. Very unfortunate circumstances that so many players have gone stone cold. But at this point, with only 25 games to go and time's running out, I would just stack the ones that are hot and hope that the others find their way.
Frank Anthony wants to know, why would the Phillies let Ben Lively and Mark Leader go for nothing?
Yeah, it's kind of a shame because the Phillies had some promising arms in those two players. And this spring training, watching Mark Leader pitch, he seemed like he was really going to have a heck of a year. And unfortunately, at the end of spring training, he got injured. Ben Lively cracks the opening day rotation. He doesn't do well in his 5 starts, an ERA over 6. They end up swapping him for Zach Eflin. But the thing about both of them is they both have some talent. But when you're the Phillies like they are right now, they've got a lot of talent in the minor leagues. They've got a lot of names that have to be added to the 40-man roster this offseason. So in a way, you're kind of projecting ahead, too. Like, you got to ask yourself, can this pitcher help us right at this moment? And we see that Mark Leader has struggled since he was injured. Ben Lively, he's only pitched in relief since he had an injury. So the question probably is answered by no, neither player can help them in the immediacy in the major league level. So then you have to ask the question, are they likely to make the cut anyway when you have to add all those players to the 40-man roster? And I think that even though both have talent and both will be probably contributors to somebody's major league team down the line, there's a certain point where the upside of other players kind of takes precedence. And And I think while both might have been useful players, and certainly with Leiter Jr., kind of a really good story coming from Tom's River, so he's kind of local, and his dad pitched for the Phillies. Good story. Ben Lively acquired for Marlon Byrd, which was kind of a really good trade that they got, that Ruben Amaro made there to get some talent for somebody who was looking to unload. Unfortunately, sometimes the roster just can't hold too many, so the Phillies had to do what they had to do, and you're going to see that going forward, the Phillies are going to have to make other tough decisions like that. And in fact, I would say the Jesmiel Valentin decision was a tough one, where they ended up cutting him, I guess, figuring that they had some players down the line on the 40-man with some higher upside. And while Pedro Florimon is helpful now, you might say, well, why'd you keep Florimon over Valentin? You could always say that, well, Florimon's probably going to be designated anyway, so maybe you try to slip them through waivers. Now, later, I was watching him pitch against the Toronto Blue Jays. They saw him pitch against the Toronto Blue Jays, and they thought that he was worth a shot. So we'll see if somebody thinks the same for Ben Lively. But there's a chance at this time of year when everybody's adding players to their 40-man roster to come up in September, you might be able to slip one or two of them through.
What do you think of Florimon getting a start at this stage of the season yesterday?
Well, the day before that, I'll tell you what I thought. That was when Cesar Hernandez was penciled into the lineup batting ninth for the first time. And my reaction to that was, okay, well, if you're going to bat Hernandez ninth, why don't you just start somebody else instead? And Florimon, if you remember a year ago, until he got injured with that awkward landing on first base that kind of broke his ankle, he was pretty good for the Phillies last year. He was batting over 300. He had some big hits for the team. So maybe they were just hoping that some of the veteran presence that Florimon has could help get this offense going. So I get it. I probably would have tried a different alignment, but of course we didn't know at the time that Maikel Franco was injured. So that necessitated Asdrubal Cabrera playing third base. He could have played second base for you. But at this point, you got to give guys opportunities and hope that they take advantage of it. And the veteran types like Jose Bautista, I would put them into the lineup more often because I think they're more likely to give you something at a time when things aren't looking good.
All right, talk with Frank. Last one for you, Frank. Why would the Phillies is there any chance of the Phillies bringing back Wilson Ramos, who has been a pretty nice offensive player for them when he's been healthy?
Yeah, I think Wilson Ramos is a tremendous player, and for years he's been a tremendous player. And I think the Phillies would definitely be in on him, provided that the deal is right in terms of number of years. I think the Phillies will pay him, would be willing to pay him very well to come on maybe a 2-year deal. But I think with Ramos, given the really rough nature of his injuries, I think it was an ACL he tore, I think, a couple years ago when the Rays signed him, and they signed him knowing he wasn't going to be ready for a while. And then, of course, this year he had his hamstring issue, even when the Phillies acquired him. So I think the longer-term commitment is a little bit more risky at such a position where you get a lot of wear and tear on the body. But if Ramos is willing to sign with the Phillies on maybe a 2-year deal and for some good money, I think the Phillies would be up for that. And I think it gives them some time to help make Jorge Alfaro into perhaps the long-term solution at the position. At the catching position, you're not going to play it 7 days a week. So you need a really good second catcher. And if Ramos can sort of bring Alfaro along and provide the leadership he's been providing so far, I think he is a nice fit for the Phillies long-term. But if there's a team more desperate for a catcher that wants to give him 3 or 4 years, I think that's a little bit dangerous to go, and I would not do that if I'm the Phillies. So, and the way they do their business, I think they would be very comfortable paying him for 2 years.
Well, he's been a pretty good offensive option for them when healthy, and can't imagine, moving forward, if they can't get another offensive player in here to lose a bat like what he's brought to the table for them. They'll play tonight. We told you their lineup. Important games down the stretch they come. 28 to go, 4 back. We'll see if the Phillies can stick around and make those games with Atlanta the final week of the season. They play 7 times over the last 2 weeks. Will they have any meaning? Well, we're about to find out. Frank Klose, everybody, at Frank Klose with a K on Twitter. Frank Klose on Twitter. Follow him there with the mailbag each week right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, guys.